Is brought to you by Princess Dental Staffing. So happy everyone can be here with me on this Wednesday. So each week, Princess Dental Staffing is bringing you a new stream that talks about ways to start and or maintain your career in the dental industry. So if you like the content that we're bringing you, be sure to drop us a like. If you don't want to miss out on future streams, be sure to follow our page or subscribe to our channel. If you want more information on the topics and the content that we're bringing you, be sure to check out Princess Dental Staffing's website, princessdentalstaffing.com, where you can read through their blog, and it's super, super easy to create a profile and start searching for jobs. And as always, if you have any questions, thoughts, comments, insights on any of the topics that we're bringing you, be sure to comment below. And if we couldn't get to those comments when this stream is live, we'll definitely get to them as soon as possible, okay? So let's jump into today's topic. Today's topic is 8 interview tips that will help get you hired. So we're sharing with you some interview tips, specifically phone interview tips that can help you through the phone interview. So let's talk about phone interviews. Let's talk about what these are and why they're important. So essentially a phone interview is an interview that you have over the phone, right? Pretty self-explanatory. So generally a phone interview it's actually sort of the first step in the interview process. And it normally serves as sort of a pre-screening tool. It normally is used by hiring managers and recruiters to determine, the top group of candidates they want to come in for an interview. But since the COVID outbreak, coronavirus, phone interviews are being used more and more as kind of the final interview, kind of the final interview. So phone interviews and also virtual interviews. So phone interviews and being able to communicate via phone and virtually is becoming, much, much more important skill to have. So super, super important. So why is it important? Because if it's kind of being used as a pre-screening tool, then it can help the hiring manager or the recruiter decide if you are one of the ones that are in the top group of candidates that can move forward to the final interview. And if it's being used as a final interview, well, that could mean that you get the job, right? If it's done well and done correctly. So super, super important to be able to interview via phone. Okay, so let's talk about tips. Okay, so let's get into these tips that we have for you. Number 1, know who will be calling you. That is tip number 1. Make sure you know who's calling you. So when the call is set up, when the phone interview is set up, they're normally scheduled. Okay. And when it's set up, make sure that you know who's going to be calling you and what their role is in the application process or within the office of the practice. Okay. Sometimes it might be the actual hiring manager that's calling you, or it might be a recruiter that's working for the practice that's calling you, okay, to give you a phone interview. So, and depending on who it is, they're probably going to be asking you different questions, right? Depending on who it is. A recruiter their questions tend to be a little bit more experience, education kind of based, whereas a hiring manager might ask you more questions, like a little bit more that helps them kind of decide whether or not you fit in with the culture, with the company culture. Okay, so that can be the difference in, who's calling you and how you're going to answer, what kind of questions you're going to be asked in the phone interview. Okay. So, so one great thing that you can do, if you know who's calling you, you can kind of do a little bit of research on them, see if you can find them on LinkedIn or, maybe on the company's website, on the practice's website. See if you can't find them to find out their role in the practice, in the organization. So you can kind of determine, hopefully make a list of some of the questions, the interview questions that you could expect to be asked. Okay. Sorry, my computer decided it wanted to update right now, so it kind of put me small. But anyways, sorry about that. So make sure you know who will be calling you, and try to make a list of interview questions based on who you think is going to be calling you. Okay, and that's actually tip number 2: prepare some answers for common interview questions. So once you have a list of interview questions that you think might be asked or are commonly asked in interviews, prepare your answers for those. Okay, do a little preparation time. Set aside some time for some preparation and do a little preparation. Okay, so let's talk about some questions, some commonly asked questions. Okay, why are you interested in the position? What makes you the ideal candidate for this position? What are your greatest strengths? What are your greatest weaknesses? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? How do you think other people would describe you, or previous supervisors or managers? How would they describe you? And also, what questions do you have for me? Okay, so those are some common interview questions that you might get asked in the interview. So you can go ahead and start preparing your answers for that. Another great tool that you can use, sometimes you can use Glassdoor. Sometimes people, and if you haven't heard of the site, it's glassdoor.com. And it's a site that kind of gives you a little bit of background on companies and agencies and organizations. And sometimes they will get information on common interview questions from people who previously interviewed with that particular company. So sometimes you can find some information there as well. And that will kind of help you prepare a little better as well. Okay. Another thing that you can do is you can kind of research the practice a little bit to see what their values are, and that might give you a little bit of inside information on what they might ask you in the phone interview as well. But make sure that you prepare your answers so that you know what you're going to be talking about. So what you can do is you can write down some notes and have those notes with you during the interview. You can do a little bit of role playing, find a friend to do a little bit of role playing, and they can be the interviewer and you of course can be the interviewee. But my favorite thing to do is actually to record yourself answering the questions. So, take your phone, take your laptop or desktop, whatever, and record yourself answering the questions and kind of and then go back and review that, and you can kind of see where you're kind of falling short or where you want to be a little bit stronger. Okay, so you can hear what the interviewer is likely going to hear when you answer the question. Okay, tip number 3: research the company. We kind of touched on this in the last tip. Make sure you research the company. You find out their values and what they're committed to. You can also find out a little bit more about what their who their typical patient is, and what sorts of procedures they commonly perform, those sorts of things, and those might be things that you were asked in the interview. Okay, so make sure that you research the company. You can also, when you're researching the company, you can also find out facts about the company and kind of write those down, and you can refer to them throughout the interview. Okay, and that actually shows potential employers that you have taken the time to get to know their practice and to research them, and to actually it shows that you have interest in being hired for this position, right? And also, a lot of the times, that's also another common question that interviewers might ask is, did you do research on our company, or do you know about our company at all, or our practice, and those sorts of things. And you can be able to answer those questions, and it's quite impressive when you can. So absolutely go ahead and do a little bit of research, write down a few facts and a few pieces of information about the practice that you are interviewing with, and make sure to mention them in the interview. Really good advice, watching yourself. Yeah, with the interviewing, watching yourself or listening to, again, if this is phone interview, you can probably just listen to yourself. You don't actually have to record yourself unless it's going to be virtual. But great way to, listen to yourself and get kind of some insight into what the interviewers might hear. Okay. Okay, so tip number 4, keep your job materials nearby. Okay, when I'm talking about job materials, I'm talking about the resume that you submitted or the application, the cover letter, your LinkedIn profile, okay, as well as the job description or the job posting. Okay, make sure you have those items handy, because if you're asked specific questions about those items in the interview, you want to make sure that you have them handy so that you don't have to go, oh, on my resume, give me just a second to pull that up so I can see what you're talking about. Shuffle, 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 right? Is all they hear on the other end. And then you kind of have to wait, and it just messes up kind of the flow of the phone interview. Okay, so make sure you have all your materials handy. And I hope that you are tailoring your resume to each and every job posting, and your cover letter to each and every job posting, which is even more of a reason to have it so nearby the one that you actually applied with, so that you can answer specific questions about it. Okay. What are some good aspects of the company to research and then to bring up in the phone interview? Great question, Taylor. So, like I said, you can look up their values and what essentially what their company is about. You can look up a little bit about their company culture as well. You can kind of take a look at some photos that they've posted online on their website, on their social media pages as well, to kind of get a feel for what the culture is. Okay. My favorite thing to do, actually, if I'm researching a company, I like to go to the About section. Okay. A lot of companies have, not all of them, mind you, but a lot of companies have it, or like a little, either the About section, sometimes it's called the History section, or sometimes they just have some information on their landing page about the company itself. Okay, so I like to visit those specific parts of their website just to, again, get a little sense of their culture, their values. You can, again, look up their history as well to find out facts about their history. Oh, I see that you were established in XYZ year, and those sorts of things. So just some facts about the history and some things you can glean about the company culture. So those are some of the things that I would kind of research. Okay, great question, Taylor. Okay. So we talked about number 4, keep your job materials nearby. Number 5 is plan to complete the interview in a quiet place. Okay, plan for your surroundings. Okay, so if you're doing this phone interview from home, make sure that you've got a room set aside where you can, be quiet, and where your surroundings are going to be quiet and you're not going to be interrupted. Make sure you turn off your things like, your phone ringer or, computer updates, things that can make noise in the background and can distract you. Okay. And of course, try to make sure that you're away from people, from pets, anything that can make loud noises and kind of mess up the flow of the interview. If you can't do it in your home or in your house, you can, other areas, you can do it in your car. You can, you can actually set aside, maybe you can set aside some, a meeting space or a meeting room in order to do that, so that you kind of have a quiet background, and that you don't kind of interrupt the flow of the phone interview with all kinds of excess noise, etc. Okay, again, turn off your TV, phone, speakers, all those sorts of things. Okay, and even if it doesn't make a whole lot of noise, you definitely want to limit distractions, because if you're distracted, of course, you can kind of get interviewers can kind of hear a break in your voice, when you just kind of stop talking. So, and it could kind of mess you up, and you have to get kind of back on track. So limit distractions, make sure you have somewhere quiet to be in order to do this phone interview. Okay. Where are we at? Number 6, take notes. So this is really, really awesome. I love the idea of taking notes during your interview. I do it all the time. Not just in interviews, but also in, just in meetings, etc., with clients. But taking notes is a great thing to do, just because, if you kind of take these notes, you can, so firstly, what it can help you do, is it can help you kind of find, where you could have answered better, or what you could have done better in the interview, right? And that way you're improving for next time. Okay. Interviewing is definitely a skill. It's something that you really do need to practice. So kind of taking notes on yourself, and taking notes on some of the questions that they asked, or those are some questions that you can, practice with. Again, if you have another phone interview lined up, and those sorts of things. So taking notes is a really great thing to do. Additionally, you can take notes about the interview, and that's really great information to include in a thank you note or a follow-up email. Okay. We've done a previous video on thank you notes. Absolutely, I'm 100% pro thank you notes or thank you emails. So if you're taking notes during your interview, you definitely have a little bit of information to use in that thank you note, thank you email, to make it more personal. Okay. So, you could say something like, oh, I was particularly interested in our conversation or I remember you mentioned that it was really important for this candidate to have, XYZ skill, which absolutely I do and have demonstrated thoroughly in my career, and those sorts of things. So taking notes, really good, just a really good practice to get into when you're doing phone interviews. And if you have to stop for a second and write something down, especially if you're in the portion where you are asking the interviewer questions, make sure that you just say that you're writing something down. Just let them know, like, hey, I'm actually writing down your answers right now, so if you hear me go quiet for a second, that's exactly why, but I promise I'm still here, is normally something that I would say. Okay. Just lets them know you're still engaged, okay? And just that you're being proactive and taking notes. Tip number 7, smile throughout the phone interview. So I don't know if any of you have heard this before. If you worked a lot in customer service, or you worked a lot in a previous position where you were on the phone all the time, you definitely want to smile when you're on the phone. It changes the quality and the tone of your voice, and it also kind of puts you in the mindset, right, to be in a phone interview and, to kind of engage those customer service skills, right? So always a good idea to smile through the phone interview. A little bit cliche, but it works, right? It definitely works to kind of help you engage that professional demeanor, okay? And they can hear that through the phone. I absolutely believe they can hear that through the phone, okay? And lastly, tip number 8, consider your ideal salary. Okay, so this is the dreaded part, right? The salary conversation, the salary, questions, right? So before your phone interview, as a matter of fact, before you even start looking for a job, make sure you do your research on what an actual salary might be for you. Okay, do a little bit of research on what you can actually expect, what you're likely to expect, practically can expect to be paid for your time. Okay, now you can do this through some online resources: payscale.com, glassdoor.com, bls.gov, which is the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. You can also go on job search engines. Sometimes they will actually post their salaries on job postings. So if you look up a few different job postings that are something that you might be interested in applying for, and if they have those salaries listed, you can kind of get a feel for what someone is generally paid in the position that you are looking to go into. Okay, some other things to consider are things such as, your years of experience, your education, your other qualifications, and of course the area that you're going to be working in, the location, right, the local area, and what they're generally paid. So a lot of things to take into consideration, but if you do a little bit of research, gather a little bit of data, you can have a pretty good idea of what you can expect to be paid. Okay, and that way, when the question comes up, or in the phone interview, or at some point in the application process, you'll have a good answer, okay? And you're not kind of put on the spot and you're kind of go, and you just say a number, okay? Also, speaking of which, don't recommend saying a number, say a salary range, okay? So generally what you want to do is you kind of want to, the bottom end is generally kind of what you want to be paid, okay? If that makes sense. So, a lot of times I hear a lot of job seekers and they're like, oh, well, bare minimum, this is what I absolutely have to be paid. When you give your salary range to the recruiter, the hiring manager, I generally recommend that your bottom range of your salary be right around what you want to be paid, what works for you best with your financial situation, those sorts of things. Okay, again, being very pragmatic in your salary expectations and what you can expect to be paid for that particular position in your local area. Okay. So make sure that you do your research on that. Okay. All right, so those are our tips for phone interviews. Let's go over them one more time. We had a whole 8 of them, so let's talk about them one more time. First, know who will be calling you and do a little bit of research to find out, who they are, what their position is in the practice, so that you can kind of get a good idea of what they might be asking you. Okay. Number 2, prepare answers to your common interview questions. Okay, and practice your answers. Okay, record yourself. Work with a friend or family member to kind of role play. Even doing it in front of a mirror. Make sure that you're doing something to prepare. Okay. Preparation is key. Number 3, research the company, find out their values, find out their company culture, find out some facts and information about their history and, what their common patient or who their common patients usually are. Okay. And be sure to mention those in the phone interview. Okay. Number 4, keep your job materials handy. So have a copy of your cover letter, your resume, your application, have your LinkedIn profile up, have the job posting up or printed out in front of you so that you have it and it's easily accessible during the phone interview. Okay. Number 5, plan to complete the interview in a quiet place. Make sure you have a designated area where you're going to minimize noises and minimize distractions. Okay. Number 6, take notes and make sure you review those notes to be better, in your next phone interview. And make sure that you take those notes in order to have a little bit of information so you can include it in a thank you note. Okay. Number 7, smile throughout the phone interview. They can hear it on the other side, and it puts you in the customer service kind of mind frame. Okay. And lastly, number 8, consider your ideal salary. Make sure that you're using a range and make sure that you've done your research so that the salary that you're asking for is reasonable. Okay. So those are our tips today. Thanks everyone for tuning in and for the great questions and thoughts and insights. We will be back next week, next Wednesday, with another topic. So until then, have a great week. Have a great weekend. I will see you soon. Bye, everyone.